This is a screencast in order to help you manipulate student data, and it's meant to go with the Morphing Rubrics in order to help developmental students presentation. First thing that you need to do when you're going to use student data, this is just an Excel page. As you can see, I'm using Excel 2010, but you can use any Excel. And what I've done here is I've arrayed the student scores. I have each score for each item on the rubric. Here I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 items. Here I've put possible total scores for each item on the rubric. And then for each student, and there's no student names here, you'll notice. You don't need them. I've put just a letter to denote it's a different person. And then each of their scores on each of the particular items on the rubric, and then finally a total score. First thing we'll need to do is work with these total scores. So what we want to do is we want to take these total scores and highlight them. I've got them highlighted in yellow so that we'll know what we're working with. And we're not highlighting this one here because this is just points possible. This is not an actual student score. Once we've done that, what we want to do is array them so that they are in order of who got the highest score to the lowest score. Now that you've got everything selected, what you do is you right click on your selection, you go to sort, and we want to sort it largest to smallest score. It'll give you some sass here. Do what it wants. And voila! You've got your scores arrayed as you would like them. So now that we've got our scores arrayed as we like them, the other thing that I want you to notice is that all the scores followed along. So we have total scores arrayed, but the scores for each student followed along with them. So as you can see, student K had perfect scores on everything and got 100. Whereas student D, and this has nothing to do with their grade, it's just a label, did okay on writing conventions, not so great on research, not so great on format, and etc., etc. So all their scores are together. Now looking at these, what I want to point out is that the students who did very well overall, that overall score should be similar across the board. So this student who did well overall, we see that this person did well on all of the items on the rubric. Now, for the student who had the smallest score, we would expect that they would also have the lowest scores on each item on the rubric. Now, looking at this item, writing conventions, we see that the lowest scoring student got a 9. At the same time, we have some higher scoring students getting the same score. Their overall score is a 91, but their score in writing conventions is the same as the student who got a 54 overall. So we're seeing that there's a problem here. Generally, if we sort of cut this in half, right, these should be higher scores here, and they should lower as they go down. That works for, say, this item, formatting, works overall. There's a little mix up here, but overall it goes from highest to lowest. Also, if we look at the item called content development, we see that the highest scores are on top with the higher scoring students, and the lower scores on the bottom with the lower scoring students. This item, organization, also seems to be a little mixed up as well. What we're going to focus on is this one here, writing conventions. Writing conventions seem to be the most mixed up scores that the students have. Because their scores are so mixed up, this makes me think, there might be a problem with this item. Is the item not specific enough? If the item's not specific, a good thing to do is to break it up into its component parts. So, what do I mean when I have writing conventions as an item? Do I mean run-ons? Do I mean fragments? Am I referring to spelling? Am I referring to punctuation? Many of these things can fit in here, and maybe all of them do. But if this student here has a problem with run-ons, and this student down here with the same score has a problem with spelling, giving them the same score on this item doesn't give them anything to do. They don't know that they were not doing well on spelling or on run-ons. They just know writing conventions overall. So they could be trying to fix some writing conventions, generally trying to fix them, but if they don't know which ones to fix, then they could be working towards nothing, essentially. So if we wanted to, we could leave that at that, and we can just examine what's working, what's not visually. And we don't really need to go any step farther. But if we feel like we'd like to, the next thing that we would do is we would want to sum up the totals for each of these items. And the way that we do that is we click on the box where we want the total to show up. We go up here, we push the equal sign, we type in the word sum, open a parentheses, and then we highlight what we want to be added or summed up. Remember to close with another parentheses, push enter, and it gives you a total. Now we want totals for each of these. So we put a little, wait till the cursor turns into cross, and we can drag this across so that each of these are summed up. And we don't have to redo that for each of them because we already know that they're going to sum. The next thing we might want to do is correlate whether the scores on each item make sense with the score on the total assessment itself. So what we do for that is we highlight an empty box to put our data in, and we need to look for a correlation function. So we click on our function key. Oh, what do you know? It's right there. Click on that, and it'll ask us what it wants us to correlate, what we want it to correlate. I say, thank you, Mr. Excel. I want you to correlate this with, click on the second one, this. I want that to correlate the items with the total scores. Thank you so much. Pull this up here. I push OK. And it tells us. Now, if we want to drag this across, what we do here, we go up into this little box, our little function box. We put a $sign here before the G, and a $sign here. And the G is just telling us it's G, column G. And it's going from G3 to G18. So if we put a $sign here and here, that will help us use this in other boxes. So we click off of it. We've got our correlation number. What we want to do is drag this across so it'll correlate all of them. And magic! Each item has been correlated mathematically with the total scores. So the higher the number, the closer the number is to 1, the better the score correlates with the total score. So item score. So what this tells us is that without really having to know a lot about statistics, but using a little bit of Excel, we can look at it. We know that the number, the correlation is supposed to be close to the number 1. Number 1 is the highest. I can say, okay, this item, which I have called integration of research, is doing all right. I'm going to leave it alone. This item, which I call format, is okay. Now, the last two items here, which are content development and organization, they're still okay. They're not super worrisome. If in the future I wanted to adjust those, I could do those, and it would probably be justified. But the biggest cause for concern is this number. It is not very close to 1. So I look at it and I say writing conventions. Okay, writing conventions, you are giving my students problems and we don't like that. We want our students to be successful. So looking at these numbers, I would just say, okay, this is the one I'm going to work on. This is the item that I'm going to morph into something else that will help my students. In my case, I made a different test item or assignment item. So because of what I found out doing my correlations, I decided to morph my rubric into something that would work better for the students. So instead of having writing conventions as one item, I've expanded those into 4 items: spelling, punctuation, fragments, and run-ons. I've also given in explicit detail what each level is for each item. So I'm telling them exemplary practices not to have any spelling errors. An exemplary practice is to have no fragments. If you have one fragment, it will knock you down a point. And that's something for the students to be able to examine in themselves. Now that they know, maybe they're not doing well on run-ons, but they're doing okay in punctuation. This is another rubric. It looks similar, but it's for a higher level class, a 102 class, instead of a developmental course. So for this one, I made the decision to break writing conventions into run-ons or fragments and spelling and punctuation together. So there are 2 items here. Different students need different things. They need different items on their rubric. So you have to morph those rubrics so that they work for the student population that you're working with. Hope this is helpful. So remember, change is a process, not an event. Keep working on it. Thanks for tuning in.